Hello there, dear listeners. I'm Mike Flanagan, coming to you from Spotify Studios in Los Angeles, and welcome to SpectreVision Radio's Director's Commentary. On each episode of this show, myself and a guest filmmaker will watch a movie together and offer you, the listeners, a chance to watch along with us as we talk about the film, what went into making it, and anything else that may come up along the way. So make sure you've got the movie queued up, your snacks are at the ready, and we'll let you know when it's time to hit play so we can all watch together. My guest today is an exciting rising star in the genre community. A graduate of the prestigious directing program at the American Film Institute, she also worked as a photojournalist and videographer at the Los Angeles Times before breaking into the business by directing episodes of the TV series Channel Zero, Legion, Briar Patch, and Brand New Cherry Flavor. She made her feature film debut with one of the best horror films of this year, a movie that absolutely blew me away, The First Omen. Please welcome Arkasha Stevenson. Hi, Arkasha. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to have you here. So we kind of got in touch earlier this year because I, on a random weekday, went to my local iPic theater because I had a rare day off, and I went alone. And I bought a ticket to The First Omen. And I hadn't heard from anybody yet who had seen it. I hadn't read anything about it. I just knew that it was out. And I sat down to watch the movie and was completely floored. I just loved it. And I came out of the theater and immediately started texting all my friends saying, have you seen this movie? And it ended up that we got in touch, I think a week or two after that, just because I wanted to be like, that was awesome. So I'm so glad that you are here. How has your year been with your first feature film coming out theatrically?
It's been pretty freaking lovely. Yeah, it's been really nice. I mean, yeah, and getting in touch with you was such a highlight. So thank you so much for your kind words, because it was such a I don't know what we were really expecting after the movie came out, but I think I was joking with you earlier that I have a younger sister, and she's not she's not really into movies. And so when I called her and I told her, like, hey, I'm going to be making a prequel to The Omen, and she was like, why would you do that? And I was like, oh gosh, okay. This is what we're walking into. But it's been really nice, kind of the love that we're getting. My biggest fear was to upset horror fans.
Sure.
And Omen fans. And so it's been really nice.
It's always tough when you go in, especially to a prequel, to a beloved movie. The prequel that I made was to Ouija, so I got away with a lot more. When you're stepping into a shadow like The Omen, that's got to be incredibly intimidating.
Yes. And that it was very frightening, but also I think really that encouraged us to try and make our own film, our own beast, just because I think we had a real come to Jesus talk with ourselves when we were hired, and we were like, I'm not Richard Donner. I don't think I'll ever be at that level, So I have to figure out what speaks to me personally about this franchise, which was really fun because it's, there's frequently these films that have such an intense impact on us when we're kids, and so much of our childhood is wrapped up in these memories of watching these movies. And it's fun, decades later to be like, oh, what exactly was I connecting to here? And to look at that with a fresh set of eyes was a fun experience. That was born out of fear and reverence.
Fear and reverence is kind of the only way to approach those kind of things.
Right? It's like what fuels my tank. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you got into the business, because I think your origin story and your trajectory is really interesting. So my first question for you officially would be, what traumatic incident in your life pushed you into movies? Which is to say, what is the elevator pitch of your origin story? Which is very interesting as you take some really interesting professional turns in there.
Yeah. Well, oh gosh. Well, I think, I'm a pretty inarticulate and shy and awkward person, and I always have been. And so, when I got to college, a photography professor put a camera in my hand and he was like, here, this will help, And he was totally right. Like, that was a way for me to learn how to talk to people and experience the world without constantly hiding behind this veil of shyness. And it was like this very, completely changed me. It was starting off as a photographer. And then I saw Wild at Heart, and my brain exploded. And it was this moment where, I love photography and I love photojournalism, and you have to really regulate and police your own emotions. Your emotions should not be part of what you're photographing.
Right.
And you should be able to look at a photo and not know a photographer's stance on something personally. David Lynch is the complete opposite of that. And there's the Wild at Heart opens with that music and the fire. And it was like something in my brain broke. And I just kept thinking, like, I didn't know you were allowed to do this. And I kept watching, and it was, so again, I'm not a terribly articulate person, but this was a language I understood. And it made me really excited about, like, hope for communication for me, if that makes any sense. But then also, after studying photojournalism, David Lynch didn't feel like a surrealist to me. It felt very akin to people I was meeting and situations I was in when I was carrying a camera around. So it was like this very sacred moment. It's like 2 a.m., drinking warm PBR, watching Wild at Heart. And it meant so much to me that I kind of put it in my pocket and didn't want to think about it or touch it for a long time. So continued to pursue photojournalism, thinking that filmmaking was just not in the stars for me. It was almost like a dangerous game to think about that. Yeah.
And so where did the photojournalism take you? Because you ended up working, you worked at the Los Angeles Times.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I graduated from college ready to enter the newspaper industry right when it was sinking.
Nice timing. Yeah.
Which was fun. Yeah. But luckily, and I think this actually worked out really well for me, is like people weren't hiring, but they were taking on interns, So right after school, I went to the Miami Herald and did a 6-month internship there. And the way I remember where I was each year was I left Miami when the naked man ate the other man's face off on the bridge. Oh my God,
I remember that. Yeah.
That was the day I left. And I arrived in LA the day they found the decapitated head in Griffith Park. So then...
Wow. What a way to mark time. What a way to,
It was a sign of some sort, I think.
Yeah. So what is it about you that attracts those kind of incredibly evil events to kind of coincide with major life decisions and moves and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's very strange. Somebody was like, it's you. You're doing this.
Yeah, you're doing this. Yeah. It's very Omen.
Yeah.
So you get to LA.
Yes.
And what happens then?
And then I, did an internship at the LA Times that ended up turning into a year-long contracting job there. And it was a year and a half of just absolute photography boot camp. And I mean, the LA Times photography staff, it's just, chock full of Pulitzer Prize winners and war photographers. And it was... Golly, it was probably one of the most impactful year and a halves I've ever had. Wow. Yeah, it was amazing.
So how do you come out of that and pick up that idea of filmmaking that you'd kind of put in your pocket? How does that transition happen? Yeah,
it will, with a lot of delusion, I think, on my part. I think it's, at the LA Times, you're really studying obviously photography and composition and how to anticipate action, but then also a lot of it is why. How are you visually articulating yourself? Like, what is the syntax of shapes on a screen? And then I think one of the biggest lessons for me was just because you can doesn't mean you should. So, like, thinking about what we're saying and how we're saying it and why we're saying it. And, when you're studying how to speak in this language, you just want to talk all the time, and so then when I saw the David Lynch film, I think I started harboring, like, keeping track of all of my emotions that I was experiencing during photojournalism, because you are in some very intense situations, and you're not really allowed, or you shouldn't really be expressing them. So I think I was tucking a lot of that away, and slowly the bucket started to overflow, and AFI was right around the corner from my house, and that's where David Lynch went. And because I'm a hopeless David Lynch groupie, I just on a whim applied. And they don't accept journalists or documentarians, and something very lucky must have happened because I got into AFI, and it felt like a really crazy move. To kind of jump ship like that, but it felt right.
I imagine a radical readjustment for the way. How do you separate when you're working in photojournalism and you're feeling those emotions that you're talking about? How do you actively keep them out of your frame? How do you keep yourself out of the picture?
I think photojournalism was. It's interesting. It's similar to being on set in high stress situations, actually. It's where you shut your brain off and you're really just working on instinct, and you're really just working on being in the exact right spot at the right time, and making yourself small, both physically but also emotionally. I think, I think most of my time as a photographer was spent in like a tiny balled up position in a corner so people would forget I was there, and that's a lot of what I feel like I try and do on set. But with filmmaking, I feel like you structure everything around your emotions and what you want to say, and then you can slip into that space.
Right.
And if you set it up right, it flows. I don't know if that made sense.
It does. It's really interesting to me to come from a discipline that's about capturing reality in a way that, like you said, you're not interfering with it in as much as you possibly can. You're making yourself small. You're trying to kind of be in the right place at the right time and let circumstance and luck and reality just kind of come into your lens.
Yeah.
And then you go into filmmaking, which is about building reality. And setting in motion this whole machine to kind of control everything that's going to be in that frame, one way or another. How were you able to navigate that shift? What was AFI like for you as you kind of first started getting in there and feeling the difference?
Yeah, it was very tough for me, that shift. I think because you go from being a lone wolf who does everything, who's constantly trying to just working from instinct, and not communicating those instincts or having to articulate those instincts, to then all of a sudden you're surrounded by so many people and you're a machine with 20 different arms that need to dance together. So AFI was I'd never been on a film set before. And it was a real process of, there's kind of the logistical process of just learning how to collaborate with so many different people and start speaking in audible words what it is you want and what you're looking for and how everybody else is feeling. But then also just this feeling of having been in almost a cramped position for so many years and now having to be able to own my own space and my own voice and ask for things and instead of waiting for these two forces to collide on camera, actually orchestrating that, that it was really kind of obviously it was an arena for me to learn how to make film and study film, but also it was just finding my literal voice, which I still have a lot of trouble with, actually. Clearly. But that, and having the confidence to speak outwardly about things that you're dreaming about.
Right.
Because that was a little taboo for a little while, it's been a really fun process. Yeah.
When at AFI, did you feel, or have you had the moment where it's like you feel like I'm a filmmaker now? When did you make something that made you a filmmaker?
Does that happen?
I don't know if it happens.
Okay, I'm waiting.
Yeah.
I hope one day.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's weird. I've talked to a lot of filmmakers who describe the same imposter syndrome. I've talked to Oscar winners who feel this way. That you never really have that moment where you kind of, permeate the membrane and say like, yep, now I'm on the other side of it. Now I'm a filmmaker. It's always kind of in retrospect, you look back and be like, well, I must be, because that's the only thing I'm doing with my time now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, that's what I'm doing for money. It's a weird thing.
Well, it's a very confronting thing where you're with your parents and they're introducing you to somebody and they say, this is my daughter. She's a what? And you're like, I don't know.
Well, so what was the first project then that you're credited directing? What technically was the first thing where you're like, I'm told I am a filmmaker now because I made this film?
Yeah, and this actually also this was a moment where I wasn't like, oh, I'm a filmmaker, but this was a moment where I was like, oh, we're making a film.
Yeah.
And that was this project. It's called Pineapple.
Yep.
And it was, I'm doing air quotes, a short film that was 30 minutes. So not really, you know.
Yeah. It's a short. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But we had barely any budget, because it was supposed to be a short film. And, my friends and I went up to a small town. It used to be a mining town, a gold mining town outside of Yosemite, and slept in our cars and just got to know everybody in town, stayed up there for months, went back and forth between here and there for months, getting to know people. And I didn't realize this at the time, but we were doing this kind of community filmmaking process, where we were going to only be able to pull this off if quite literally this is a town, it's technically a ghost town, quote unquote, but like 150 to 200 people still live there. And we were only able to do this because everybody chipped in to the project. So people were cooking for us, they were housing us, or they were acting in it. They were providing trained chickens and pig heads and, and that there was kind of a moment on set. It was the big day where, I think we had 50 extras and they were all people living in town, donating their cars. And there was it was just a dolly shot. Now I realize it's just a 8-foot dolly shot with no pans, no nothing, just straight on. But for me, this was like, this is a big shot, Yeah. And everybody, it just worked out the first take. And it was the first moment where I was like, whoa, we're doing something, we're making a movie. And that was a breakthrough moment for me because, I'd always been a one-man band for a while.
Yeah. So as you finish that project, as Pineapple's done,
right.
How does your AFI experience kind of resolve? You get through the program, you make some work you're really proud of, and I think I read that you were winning awards too at AFI. Is that right?
Oh, no.
No.
I don't think so.
My information is incorrect.
No, what was really, really lovely is that our thesis film, which was called Vessels,
Yes.
which was kind of this amalgamation of a project that I was trying to do as a photojournalist, but was having a really hard time getting access. It's about black market plastic surgery in the trans community here in Hollywood, and I just couldn't get in really to do this through photojournalism. But we did a thesis project where we were, working with women who were either thinking about getting these surgeries or had these surgeries. And that project won the Iris Prize in Wales, which was, yes.
That is what I read.
Yes, that's what we got, yeah.
Yes, all right.
Yeah.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
And what an incredible topic, too. What an incredible thing to dig into. But you finish, that's your thesis film. You graduate from AFI. And then what happens for you next?
Yeah, and then it's you're kind of out at sea, right?
Right.
And trying to figure out what's going on. And luckily Pineapple came pretty quickly after graduation, and that was an obsession. And so I forgot that I was unemployed and with no prospects. And then Nick Antosca, who's done Channel Zero and
Yes.
The Act, and he saw Pineapple, and he was called and said, "Do you want to do the third season of Channel Zero? It's about cannibalism." And I was like, "Yes, I'm in. Say no more. I'm there." And I don't know. I think without Nick, I wouldn't have had a career, just because that was such an intense boost up, because I went from, a quote unquote short film that shot 5.5 days to all of a sudden being on a 45-day shoot.
Right. Big difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
And just, again, another film school packed into 5 months, so.
And so coming into television, which is a whole different type of production in general, you stayed in TV kind of after that. You come into Channel Zero, and then you're directing on Legion. You're directing the pilot for Brand New Cherry Flavor.
Yeah.
Right? How did TV differ from what you were expecting, kind of coming out of AFI and coming out of your short film work? What was TV like?
Well, yeah, I thought I was going to go on and do very low budget horror films after AFI. That's what I had packed my bags and was ready for that plane. But I think something happened on Pineapple where I got really addicted to this feeling of moving fast with for me, a large crew. Like, there's magic when everything starts to flow, and and your adrenaline's rushing and everybody's moving towards, the same goal. It's a very intoxicating feeling. And then getting to do television, that's all it is just because, the schedules are tighter, you're moving at a faster pace, and it forced me even farther into that instinct feeling. So I was just on a TV high, having a ball. There's toys I didn't even know what they were, I remember on Channel Zero, we did a crane shot, and I was just screaming. I was so happy, and everybody was like, "Tell her to shut up. What's going on? Tell her to chill out." But I was just so excited. And so I was really, and then I love working with Nick. And so he was really gracious, brought us back on Brand New Cherry Flavor. And I was just enjoying that ride for a while. Sorry, I'm just kind of blabbering now.
No. This is something I think a lot of the people, I hope, that listen to this show are aspiring filmmakers. And I think hearing about kind of the paths that different filmmakers have taken, to find their way into that brass ring where you're doing television, you're doing theatrical, I think it's all very, very interesting. And because you've come from such different disciplines and had to kind of make transitions between them so quickly in some cases, I think it's really very cool and really worth talking about.
Oh, thank you. No, that's very kind of you. I think it was so nice, because I think with each of those jumps there are I've had people around me to make it feel like it's okay to learn on the job, and I think like with television, I think it was so key because I had come from stills and a professor came up to me after a couple of shorts I had done and he goes, they're called movies, right? You should be moving. The camera should move. And that, for some reason, that terrified me. Like the idea of having to come up with, like, constantly be framing a perfect composition as the camera's going and thinking about, like, okay, these are like 60 variations of perfect compositions I need to be framing on a 4-foot dolly move. Like, that's crazy, right? That's not how movies work. But in my head, that's what I was thinking. And so I was terrified to move the camera. So then when you go into television, it was that was me learning movement,
That's fascinating. It's, I was also very afraid to move the camera
really?
Early in my career. Very much. Yeah. And because everything you learn about framing academically is, even studying cinema, is stills. You're looking at, you're often just studying a freeze frame from an incredible film. And so most of the language that I knew was that too. Do you feel more comfortable moving the camera now?
Absolutely not. See, what's wrong with me? It's like
nothing's wrong with you at all. And because when we get to watching First Omen, it's a beautifully shot movie, and your composition is extraordinary.
Thank you.
But your moves are also wonderful. So I'm excited to kind of unpack that as we go. But so you're working in television. I'm sure, like everybody, working in television, have ambitions to get into theatrical features. How do you make that jump? Because that's an incredibly difficult jump to make. That's really tough.
Yeah, that was another, I do value my self-delusion quite a bit because it's really helped in a lot of these moments where, and actually our AD on this project said, you're not in television anymore, so slow down, think about what this world smells like. And I was like, ooh,
that's really cool. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, and it's actually the second time somebody in my life has said something like that. I had a photo editor that said, he said, you can tell the relationship somebody has with who's photographing them based on if you're taking a really good photo, you can tell. And also a really good photo lets you know what the room smells like. And then for like 10 years later, for this AD to say, like, what does your world smell like? I was just like, whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That has never occurred to me working. Now that's all I'm going to be able to think about.
Right. Once you think, then it's just, that's all you're composing smell.
Yeah.
After somebody says that to you. So that really hit me quite hard. And having to rewire the brain in the sense of slowing down makes you, it gives room for you to doubt yourself, I think is the problem I had. So jumping from television where it's like you're at war, go, 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 go. You're following a character for so long, so you really know this character. Slowing down was scary for me.
That's very interesting. I've talked to a lot of people who came at it the other way, who went from features into television and found the sudden acceleration of pace to be really destabilizing. It's very interesting to me that slowing down is where the doubt creeps in for you. That's very interesting.
They're probably more stable and confident than me.
So how do you make the transition, though? I assume you're out for ODAs, which is open directing assignments, right? You've got projects around town looking for a filmmaker, and you're now in a position where you've got to go pitch on them. You've got to go kind of try to grab them. What is that side of the business like for you as you kind of finish with or as you take a short break from your television work?
Yeah, it's pitching is like dating, it's it's like they're going to find out you're crazy eventually, And it's like, so you got like, why waste everybody's time? Just show them the crazy right off the bat, And I think that's, we pitched during COVID, and COVID was this moment where there was quiet. I say we because I work so closely with my partner, Tim Smith.
Yes.
So during COVID, we had this moment of quiet where we were able to let the ride stop for a minute and recalibrate and think like, okay, what we always dreamed about making features. When are we going to try and do that? And what kind of feature do we want to make? And with who? And so right when we were asking those questions, the first Omen came to us. And right when we were reading the first Omen, we were in Texas and the 6-week ban passed. And all these things started to align where it was like, okay, we're going to make this pitch and let's give it our all. And that meant like, let's not waste anybody's time. Let's just say what we want. And so Tim was like, well, that means we have to pitch the vagina shot. And so I was like, okay, we're going to do that. So we got references, birthing references from YouTube and Georgia O'Keeffe paintings and all sorts of stuff. And we get on the Zoom and with all these lovely people and we pitch the shot and then the Zoom freezes. And we think, oh, damn, that was the worst possible moment. And I said, oh, it's frozen. And somebody goes, no, we're all still here, but that really paid off because everybody was like, okay, yes, we have to talk about it, but yes.
And did that shot sequence that you pitched, do you think that really tipped the job in your favor?
I like to think so.
Yeah.
I like to think that the power of the vagina got me hired.
How long have you been working with Tim?
Since Pineapple.
Since Pineapple.
Yeah. So I met him right after film school. We had 2 other producers on Pineapple, and they said, this is too big. We need to hire a 3rd producer. His name's Tim Smith. Mm-hmm. He's at Sundance. You won't meet him for a while. And I was like, that means he doesn't exist, and you guys are stealing money from the budget. Tim Smith, like, come on, guys. And then I met him. I met Tim Smith, and I immediately fell in love with him, and I fell in love with his brain. And we've been working really closely for, we met 9 years ago. We've been working together for 9 years.
We talked about this when we first met a little bit because I also work with my spouse, right. And it's wonderful, but it can also be tough to kind of hold on to each other in the storm of the business because a lot of times people don't want you to come working with a partner. How has that been for you guys?
It's been really tough.
Yeah.
I think there's not really there's not a union for couples, there's not, we
could start one.
We should start one.
Yeah.
Because it is, I understand there's a lot of stigma that comes along with it. Right. Sure. And I think it's easier this sounds really dark, but to control people when they're alone,
Sure. Yeah.
And I think there is the worry that the romance will spill onto set, but I think that you just have to collect the evidence that proves that this is for the better, that this is, nobody in this industry works alone, Yeah. Yeah.
And those kind of partnerships, because we developed them all over the industry with my director of photography, and I worked together on Oculus and have stayed together, right. ever since. It's like you develop these relationships that you carry with you because a valued collaborator is always going to make the work better. Right. And you become trusting and comfortable and they understand you. And it is interesting, though, we had Karin Kusama on the program and we were talking about the same thing because she also works with her partner. And it is a strange stigma that can kind of stick to that. It's weird. I don't necessarily understand why.
Well, did you ever have a problem bringing your DP with you?
No, not really.
Yeah, it's
no.
interesting, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It is, but I think there's such a I don't think I would be able to work in any other way because I don't. I think I'm sure you're the same way. It's filmmaking is your life, and there's not really a separation, and your personal life so informs what goes on the what goes in the frame and in the story. And so to have a partner there with you feeding that is amazing.
Well, and because I've never met the filmmaker who leaves work at work. I've never met that filmmaker who doesn't bring it home. I don't know if it's possible, because it just consumes a certain percentage of your mind. And it's essential to have whoever's at home with you needs to understand that, and they're a part of it anyway. They're collaborating regardless. If you can go to work with them and come home together, that to me is an incredible thing. And one of my favorite things about my career, my life. But I think it was nice to kind of talk about that when we first met as something in common, because I don't think it's something a lot of people talk about in this business.
We should talk about it more. We should, I think you said this, is that this is such an intimate process. Yeah. You should be with people who know you to your core to help. I mean, you birth movies, So, Also, it's great because Tim talks in his sleep, and he works out a lot of problems in his sleep. So he comes up with great ideas while he's, yelling and waving his hands around half asleep at night. So.
So you and Tim win this job on the first Omen, and off you go to make your first studio wide release, which is, going into your first feature is an enormous amount of pressure. Anyway, going into a first feature that is a sequel to a beloved classic, a prequel to a beloved classic, that has all the pressure that comes with a theatrical release, which is a completely different animal. From independents, from streamers. How did you embrace that? How did you go into that process?
Initially it was meant for streamer. Mm-hmm. And so I think that if I had known it would have been theatrical, the pressure might have crushed me. But Actually, Karin Kusama, I saw her speak once, and she said, the theatrical experience is going to save democracy. and I was like, yes. So I think I'm glad that I didn't know where the film was going to end up before we started. But you know what? It was so run and gun at the beginning that I don't even think I had time to stop and think, because I think the film, it was greenlit, and a few days later, we flew off to Rome.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a real blast out of the cannon. Go, 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 go. Italy shuts down in August, and we flew out at the end of June. Mm. And so we kind of already knew that for 4 weeks out of our prep, we wouldn't be able to do anything. So it was just war mode, go. Yeah.
Let's talk about the first Omen a little bit.
Yeah.
So, you wrote this with Tim. There's other writing credits to Keith Thomas on there, because this project existed, I think, in several iterations before you guys came on. Right. It stars Nell Tiger-Free, Ralph Ineson. Am I saying that right?
Einson.
Let me do that again. It stars Nell Tiger-Free, Ralph Ineson, and Sonia Braga. You shot this in Rome in 2022, right? And if my research is correct, it was initially rated NC-17.
Oh, yes.
And you had to go back and forth a lot. And I want to talk specifically about that sequence and why. We'll get into that in the commentary. But it was released theatrically on April 5th, 2024. It was critically very well received. You're boasting an 81% certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And it grossed $54 million worldwide. Which is, I think, terrific. So better than my movies have done. So, yeah. This is a great place to declare that is a wrap on our Act 1 episode. We're heading now into Act 2, and we so hope that you'll join us at home.
Stay tuned for Act 2 of Director's Commentary. Director's Commentary is a SpectreVision Radio production recorded at Spotify Studios in downtown Los Angeles, California. Hosted by Mike Flanagan. Executive producers Mike Flanagan, Daniel Noah, and Jim Perry. Producers Lawrence Ingley, Stephen Demler, Mike Risley, and Elijah Wood. Associate producer Alexandra Magistro. On-set producer Christina Campagnola. Music by Morgan Whirlage. Edited and mixed by Graham Resnick. Art by Telepath. Director's Commentary is a production of SpectreVision Radio.